There is a specific kind of loneliness that no one talks about. Not the loneliness of the person eating alone. Not the loneliness of the one who never gets invited. This is the loneliness of the person in the center of the room. The one everyone gravitates toward. The one who makes people laugh, who remembers birthdays, who gets tagged in posts and praised in group chats, who drives home after the party, sits in the driveway, and feels completely hollow, like none of it happened, like none of it counted. This is not a failure of gratitude. This is not ingratitude dressed up as depth. This is a real psychological phenomenon. And if it is yours, you have probably never been given permission to say so out loud. The loneliness no one believes in. We have a cultural script for loneliness. It looks like isolation. It looks like the person who has no one. And because we have that script, anyone who deviates from it, anyone who is surrounded and still empty, is left with nowhere to put what they feel. You cannot post about this. You cannot bring it up without sounding ungrateful, performative, or quietly insane. Because the implicit social contract says that if you have people, you are not allowed to be lonely. But loneliness is not a headcount problem. Researchers figured this out decades ago, and the insight never quite made it into mainstream conversation. In the 1970s, sociologist Robert Weiss drew a distinction that changed how psychologists think about isolation. He separated what he called social loneliness from emotional loneliness. Social loneliness is the absence of a social network, the feeling of being excluded, of having no people. Emotional loneliness is something different entirely. It is the absence of a specific, close, intimate bond, a relationship in which you are truly known. And Weiss found that these two forms of loneliness are functionally independent. You can have one without the other in either direction, which means you can be surrounded by 100 people who love a version of you and still experience emotional loneliness at a clinical level. The crowd does not fix it. The crowd, in certain configurations, makes it worse. The performance and the person. Here is where it gets precise, because there is a reason some people end up loved by everyone and known by no one. And it is not accidental. Many people who occupy the center of rooms learned very early that being liked was a form of safety. That warmth, humor, social fluency, these were tools, not expressions of self, but protections of it. Psychologists studying attachment patterns have documented this in detail. The child who grows up in an environment where emotional authenticity is met with discomfort, dismissal, or unpredictability does not stop needing connection. They reroute it. They learn to offer a version of themselves that reliably produces positive responses. They become, in the language of developmental psychology, socially competent in ways that serve as armor. By adulthood, this can look indistinguishable from genuine extroversion. The ease is real. The warmth is real. But the self being offered is curated. And the curation happens so automatically, so far below conscious awareness, that many people do not even know they are doing it. They just know that after every social interaction, even wonderful ones, they come home feeling like they have been running a very long race in shoes that do not belong to them. The applause is real. The performer is exhausted, and the person underneath has not been seen at all. The sociometer and what we actually want. In 1995, psychologist Mark Leary at Duke University proposed what he called sociometer theory. The basic idea is elegant. Self-esteem, Leary argued, is not really about how we feel about ourselves in isolation. It is a monitoring system, a kind of internal gauge that tracks how accepted, valued, and included we are in the social groups that matter to us. When the sociometer reads high, we feel good. When it reads low, we feel the psychological pain of rejection. On the surface, someone who is loved by everyone should have a permanently elevated sociometer, and in some ways they do. The signal is constantly positive. Approval flows in from every direction. But here is the flaw in that logic. Leary's research also showed that what the sociometer actually tracks is not approval in the abstract. It tracks whether we are valued for who we genuinely are. Generic approval of a performance, of a social role, of the charming self we project, does not fully register. The system knows the difference between being liked and being known, and it is the second one that the sociometer is actually measuring for. This is why someone can receive praise all day and feel at a cellular level that none of it touched them. because at some level they know, even if they have never articulated it, that the person being praised is not entirely them. Belonging versus mattering. There is a distinction in the research that cuts even deeper. Psychologists Gregory Elliott and Melissa Milkey, building on work in social psychology and identity theory, drew a line between belonging and mattering. Belonging is about being included, being present, being part of the group. Mattering is something more specific. It is the sense that your presence makes a difference, that you are noticed, that if you were gone, there would be a particular shape of absence where you used to be. These two things feel like they should come together, but they frequently do not. And the people most vulnerable to this split are the ones who have become socially essential, the glue of friend groups, the ones who coordinate and connect and hold space for everyone else. They belong, absolutely. But belonging that is contingent on function, on what you provide, on the role you play, is a fragile thing. It answers the question, are you here with yes? It leaves the deeper question, do you matter? Does your specific self matter? Entirely unanswered. And a person can feel that gap every single day without having a single word for it. The paradox of hollow extroversion. There is a particular flavor of this experience that researchers sometimes call hollow extroversion. High social performance paired with low emotional fulfillment. It is not introversion in disguise. The person is not drained by people. They are drained by the gap between the social contact they have and the intimacy they are not getting from it. Psychologist Ami Rokak, who has studied loneliness extensively, found that what predicts loneliness most powerfully is not social frequency or even social quality in the conventional sense. It is the degree to which a person feels they can reveal themselves fully, their uncertainty, their darkness, their unfinished thinking, without the relationship being endangered. The capacity for what researchers call self-disclosure without social penalty. For people who have built their social value on a particular presentation, this is almost impossible. The risk calculation does not work. Because if the performance is what people love, what happens when the performance stops? There is no clean answer to that question. So the performance continues, and the person behind it becomes increasingly invisible, even to themselves. The cost of being everyone's person. There is something else worth naming, because people in this position often do not just feel unseen. They feel responsible. When you are the person everyone comes to, the one who holds the room, who manages the mood, who makes things okay for everyone else, you absorb other people's emotional weight constantly, and there is rarely anyone positioned to hold yours. Not because no one would want to, but because you have presented yourself so consistently as someone who does not need it that the offer does not come. Psychologists studying what they call emotional labor, work first formally named by sociologist Arlie Hochschild, have documented the cumulative toll of managing emotions as a social function. Hochschild's original research was on service workers, but the pattern extends everywhere that emotional performance is demanded. The cost is not just fatigue, it is a progressive disconnection from your own interior states. When you spend enough time performing rather than feeling, you can lose track of what you actually feel. The hollowness becomes not just social, but internal. You reach for your own emotional response to something and find, with some alarm, that there is a delay, a blankness, an uncertainty about what is actually yours. What the research says about the way out. This is the part where most content will tell you to find your people, set boundaries, be vulnerable. And those things are true, but they are not sufficient without understanding the obstacle underneath them. The obstacle is that vulnerability requires a tolerable level of risk. And for someone whose social position has been built on a particular presentation, the perceived risk of genuine self-disclosure is not small. Research by Brené Brown on shame and vulnerability, and separately by Arthur Aaron at Stony Brook University, whose famous 36 questions study showed that intimacy can be deliberately generated through escalating mutual self-disclosure, both point to the same underlying mechanism. Closeness is built by revealing and being received, not by being impressive, not by being useful, by being uncertain and having someone stay. The problem is that this kind of intimacy requires slowing down the performance long enough to let the person underneath be visible. And the first few times you try, especially if you have spent years behind the performance, It can feel like stepping off a cliff. The social ease is gone. The automatic warmth is replaced by something quieter and less practiced. And it feels, paradoxically, far more dangerous than any room you have ever walked into. But it is the only direction the research points, not toward more connections, toward fewer, truer ones, where the version of you that goes home and sits in the driveway, the one who feels nothing after the party, is the one actually being known. The quiet truth at the end. There is a particular cruelty in this kind of loneliness, because it comes without permission to complain, without the social legitimacy of visible isolation. You are surrounded and suffering, and the world tells you those two things cannot coexist, but they can. They do. In more people than anyone admits. The thing worth sitting with is this: the emptiness you feel after rooms full of people who love you is not evidence that you are broken. It is evidence that you have been offering something real, your time, your warmth, your social intelligence, while keeping the most real part of yourself in reserve. Not out of deception, out of a very old and very understandable kind of self-protection. The question is not whether people would still be there if they knew you. You probably cannot answer that yet, but neither can you answer it from behind the performance. The only way to find out if you can be known is to be findable. I'll see you in the next one.